What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel, the Leftlane channel. This is the first video that I've recorded in a while, and we're back with a podcast. This is the first podcast back since UFC 291, Poirier versus Gaethje, and I'm excited to talk about a lot of the UFC news and a lot of the fights that have happened since that last podcast. Got a fair bit to go over, and we're just going to start off by recapping UFC 292. Last week's pay-per-view, Sean O'Malley defeated Aljamain Sterling to become the bantamweight champion. Zhang Weili dominated Amanda Lemos to retain the belt. Garry put on a dominant masterclass over Neil Magny. Damon Blackshire went to a close loss with Mario Batista in his attempts to become the first person to win 2 fights in 7 days. Chito Vera put on a status quo kind of performance against Pedro Munoz. Chris Weidman had a tough loss against Brad Tavares. We had Gregory Rodriguez deliver some violent elbows in the first round to knock out Dennis Tallulah. The Ultimate Fighter finales were great. Brad Katona versus Cody Gibson was one of the best fights of the year. Gerald Meerschaert versus Andre Petrovsky was a very kind of Gerald Meerschaert type of fight. And then the two ladies at the start of the card both had impressive performances. Corrine Silva with a round one submission and Natalia Silva with a dominant decision. So that was UFC 292. It was a really solid card. A lot of good fights to talk about, lot of kind of storylines to talk about going out of it, but none bigger in my opinion than let's just talk about Sean O'Malley and his future and the future reign that he could potentially kind of bring together as a bantamweight champion. So it's looking like it's probably going to be Chito Vera next. That's looking like the next matchup. Whether he deserves it or not, I don't believe he does, but money talks, and that's the biggest fight in the bantamweight division right now. It's looking like it'll probably happen later in the year, maybe early next year. And I do predict Sean O'Malley will beat Chito Vera. I just believe he's a better striker by far, and I don't believe that Chito's durability and his kind of cardio and ability to find finishes late in fights is going to keep up with O'Malley because Chito's got no grappling, so there's nothing to worry about there. And I do believe that O'Malley's just such a better striker. Like, we saw Cheeto get absolutely torn apart on the feet by Corey Sandhagen, losing quite a few moments of the fight against Pedro Munoz, losing to Dominic Cruz on the feet even. So I do believe that his stand-up is just not at the level that it needs to be able to kind of beat O'Malley. Of course, he can catch him, but we really just haven't seen O'Malley caught with a big shot, apart from Peter Yan in their fight, and I believe he's leveled up a lot since then, and I don't believe either that Chito Vera has that level of technical striking as a Peter Yan to be able to catch people, but obviously 5 rounder will be for the title when it does happen, and anything can happen, but something just tells me O'Malley wins that fight. Could even drop him and put him away, but I think he could just outclass him over 5 rounds. Another potential opponent, we got the likes of Corey Sandhagen as well, coming off a dominant win over Rob Font. Not the most exciting, but dominant nonetheless. Just grappled him for 5 rounds, and I do actually believe that Corey Sandhagen is one of the toughest matchups for Sean O'Malley, and someone who I would arguably favour to beat O'Malley if those two fought for the belt. Another potential opponent, we've got Merab Dvalishvili, who's been kind of just talking about how he doesn't want a title shot and he thinks Aljo should get a rematch. This guy is just determined to sabotage his own career at all costs. But I do also believe he would be a really tough matchup for Sean O'Malley with that relentless grappling cardio style that I don't think O'Malley would be able to keep up with. But Marab's very open on the feet, so he could definitely get countered and put down. Other opponents, Henry Cejudo, similar sort of grappling with Marab. Really short guy, a lot quicker than a lot of the other guys at bantamweight. Other guys like Aljo in a potential rematch, I think O'Malley beats. Guys like maybe Song Yadong could pose some problems in a few years' time. But depending on which order they give him the matchups in, I could see Sean O'Malley sort of bringing together a few title defenses and maybe making a bit of a legacy for himself at bantamweight, which would be very entertaining to see. I'm not the biggest fan of O'Malley, and not a lot of people aren't, but you can't deny that the guy is pure excitement and he brings in attention to fights. So really excited to see the future of bantamweight with O'Malley as champion. But let's talk about Aljo. The loser of the UFC 292 main event, tough loss, lost his belt for the lost the fight for the first time since Marlon Moraes quite a while ago. and lost that kind of streak that he was on after winning the belt from DQ with Yarn, um, and then those kind of title runs that he went on with Yarn in the rematch, Dillashaw, and then Cejudo. So that was a really good run that he had going on, and he was on his way to bantamweight legacy, or bantamweight goat legacy. But that KO loss is really going to halt things for him, and I do believe he should move up to 145. I don't think there's anything left for him at bantamweight, and I do think that if he sticks around, it's only going to hurt his future legacy and just take away from some of his wins. Like if he ever fights Peter Yan again and loses, that's going to take away from those guys. If he loses to like I don't know a Song Yadong or like a Cheeto Vera or something like that, then that's just going to only take away from his bantamweight legacy, which he's already, in my opinion, the second greatest bantamweight of all time behind Dominic Cruz. So I do believe Aljo would be best suited to just go up to 145, chase a title there, try and beat Max Holloway, maybe try and fight like a Kelvin Cater, a Brian Ortega, maybe, if you want to go straight to the top of the rankings, like a Yair Rodriguez. There's lots of guys for Aljo to fight at featherweight. Hasn't fought any of them. And there's some really intriguing matchups at featherweight. I like the Brian Ortega. I think that's a really intriguing grappling match. But yeah, I do believe Aljo should move up. Let's talk about Zhang Weili and just how good is this woman, because that was an absolute domination. She landed about 290 to 30 strikes against Amanda Lemos. A lot of them through ground and pound through grappling, but nonetheless, an extremely dominant 50-43 kind of performance, in my opinion. And it's just hard to see who's beating this fighter. It's just hard to see who could beat Zhang Weili. Yan Jianan appears to be next, and they're going to probably look to do a UFC China. I do think Zhang Weili just wins that. I don't think there's really anywhere that Yan Jianan just has an advantage, to be honest. Tatiana Suarez is really the only girl at 115 that I could see posing an issue with that heavy, relentless grappling style. But since working with Cejudo, Zhang Weili has drastically improved her grappling, and she's looking like a beast on the ground in her last two fights against Lemos and Esparza. So yeah, I do think she holds on to the belt for as long as she pleases. She could definitely lose to Tatiana Suarez, but I think in that fight she's just got such an advantage on the feet. And I think that having a whole camp to just train for wrestling, and I think she's already arguably good enough. I do believe she would get the job done in a tough fight over Tatiana Suarez. Um, is Ian Garry the future? I think he is. I think the future is slowly becoming the present, and I think Ian Garry is going to be a name in the top five near you soon. And I think he's a future title challenger and maybe a future champion, because that performance over Neil Magny was really, really impressive. Not many guys just absolutely thoroughly dominate Neil Magny over 3 rounds. He's a tough vet. He's been around for ages. Got all of that experience. He's beat guys that he arguably shouldn't have beat before. He's got a win over Jeff Neal. Um, and the only guys that really like beat him and finish him are like Gilbert Burns and Shavkat Rakhmonov in recent years. But that's a different type of win with Ian Garry, just absolutely beating the brakes off of him. So I was really impressed by his performance. And I think Stephen Thompson is probably the next matchup. And I think after that, if he doesn't lose that, he's got to really just work on his grappling. We haven't seen him really suffer in the grappling, but we've seen him how good he is of a striker. So I would assume the grappling area would be the weakness that we could potentially see be exposed. But ultimately, I do just believe Ian Garry's a phenomenal fighter, and I do believe the way he talks. I don't think he's making bullshit up. Whether you like him or not, whether you agree with his kind of stances on things or not, again, phenomenal fighter, and so you just got to respect it, because I think I can just kind of see it written in the stars: Ian Garry versus Leon Edwards in London or in Dublin for the title late 2024, early 2025, if Leon can hold on to it for that long. But really good performance from him a few weekends ago. So good stuff from me and Garry. Look forward to his next fight soon. Probably looking like it's going to be November MSG or maybe December. But he definitely should be fighting by the end of the year, because he took real no damage in that Neil Magny fight. And then let's recap the most recent card, UFC Singapore. It was a really good card. We obviously had the emotional retirement of Korean Zombie, which came with a vicious KO loss at the hands of Max Holloway. We had Anthony Smith beat Ryan Spann on paper. He beat him, I wouldn't say fair and square, but a very close, bit of good win from Anthony Smith. and it just Ryan Spann continuously shows to be one of the most unreliable fighters in the sport, because he has some of the worst decision making that I've ever seen in the octagon. We had Giga Chikadze make his return after around 20 months. Looked solid against Alex Caceres, not a world kind of beating performance that has me thinking he's a future champion. But excited to see him against the kind of strikers of the featherweight division. I like to see maybe a Josh Emmett fight, um, maybe a Yair Rodriguez if you want to really jump him up, because that would be a fun fight on the feet with the kicks. We also had Rinya Nakamura, who appears to be a massive problem for that bantamweight division, and he's someone that I'm going to talk about just in a little bit about another topic with the future of the bantamweight division. But he looked really good against Fernie Garcia. We had Erin Blanchfeild stamp her name as the potential next contender and a real problem for both Alexa Grasso and Valentina Shevchenko. And then we had Junior Tafa open up the main card by chinning Parker Porter in just over a minute. And then the prelims were great too. Garrett Armfield got a sick KO. Billy Goff got a body shot KO. And just a bunch of fun fights on the prelims. Waldo Cortez Acosta finally got a finish. Had the guy wobbling all over the place. So it was a really fun UFC Singapore card. But I just wanted to give a bit of a tribute to the Korean Zombie and his amazing career, because it's a really special one, and it's rare that you see the career of a fighter who was not the champion be celebrated so much. And not even an interim champion, not even a two-time title challenger, but not a guy that was ever even regarded as like the A+ tier of the sport, but he's just a fan favorite. Wins over like Dustin Poirier, Hanato Moicano, Dan Ige, these kind of guys, and fights against Max Holloway, Alexander Volkanovski, Yair Rodriguez. He beat Frankie Edgar. These are just some of the amazing career moments. He got the first twister in UFC history. So the career of the Korean Zombie is one that needs to be celebrated for years to come. And I do expect him to be in the Hall of Fame, if not for his career, if but for a fight, because he had some absolute barn burners, and there's no doubt in my mind that he should have some sort of a place in that Hall of Fame. And if not, he'll be in the hearts and minds of the MMA fans forever. I did a little kind of tribute post to him over on my Instagram, Leftlane MMA. Just saying what I am now, like just giving the respect to the legend, and celebrating an amazing career. But let's talk about Max Holloway. What's next for him? The winner of the main event of UFC Singapore got a big KO win. Retired the Korean Zombie, had a great emotional moment post fight. And what's next for him? Because he has basically beat everyone at featherweight. He has beat Yair Rodriguez. He's beat Arnold Allen. He's beat Brian Ortega. He's beat Kelvin Cater. Um, he's beat these guys. Ilia Topuria is like the guy that he hasn't beat, and that's the guy who's next up for the title. Like, he's just beat everyone. So I think he needs to either face Aljamain Sterling when he moves up, or go up to lightweight, because in my opinion, there's no point in doing like Holloway versus Josh Emmett. Like, what's the point? Josh Emmett, sorry, in back-to-back fights has just been pieced up and dominated by Ilia Topuria, and then before that got TKO'd in the second round by Yair, or subbed, sorry, in the second round by Yair Rodriguez. So, Josh Emmett does not deserve to fight the number one guy. You can't just say, oh, because he hasn't fought him. Like, what are we trying to do? Get Max Holloway wins over the whole top 15 at featherweight? Like, that's not what needs to happen. He needs to either fight Aljamain Sterling, and then move up if he wins that, because I don't care about a fourth fight with him and Volkanovski, and I don't think anyone does, and I think you're lying to yourself if you do, because, oh, he got a KO against Zombie, like, so did Volk, man, like, and Volk dominated Zombie more than Holloway did. Holloway caught him at moments with Zombie rushing in, but Zombie fought clean and technical because he knew that that was his last title opportunity against Volk, and he still got absolutely dominated. So Volkanovski is levels ahead of Max Holloway. I don't care about a fourth fight when the guy is 0-3. So he needs to go up to lightweight, fight like a Rafael Fiziev, a Dustin Poirier in a trilogy maybe, like Dan Hooker. Like, fight one of these kind of guys, because I don't want to see him just keep beating contenders at featherweight. We need some movement. We need some more guys to fight for the belt. Like, Arnold Allen was a win away from fighting for the belt. If you just had him fight Brian Ortega or something instead, or like Yair Rodriguez, that's your next title challenger right there. But they just feel the need to give everyone to Max Holloway. Thankfully, it appears as if they're learning and they're not going to do the same thing with Ilia Topouria. But I don't know, man. It's just a tough spot for Holloway. Like, he's clearly not the level of Volkanovski, but he is the level of a champion. Like, he is championship caliber, just not Volkanovski caliber, because that's the highest bar to fucking set, or to overcome in the sport is beating Volkanovski. So I think we see Max move up. We'll just fight Aljo. Because otherwise, who cares? Him versus Josh Emmett, whatever, doesn't excite me. Him versus Giga, he'll piece him up for 5 rounds. Like, none of these fights excite me. I want to talk about Erin Blanchfeild, and I believe she will soon reign, and she will soon rule the roof at 125, because even in a kind of uneventful, not super action-packed, no finish kind of performance against Tyler Santos, I think that's her toughest matchup at 125. I think that Tyler Santos is a girl with extremely good wrestling and jiu-jitsu, to counter the takedown attempts, and then good on the feet. And Erin Blanchfield kind of just won that fight after the first round. We saw her getting completely outstruck on the feet, but she won that fight just by kind of marabbing it and just kind of biting down on the mouthpiece and just shooting over and over and just pressuring and pressuring and just having better cardio than the other person. So I'm not going to say I'm super impressed, but I'm impressed that a 24-year-old with not that many wins over top caliber women in the UFC, um, come in and then clearly beat a former title challenger that almost arguably beat Valentina Shevchenko. I'm very impressed that she can get that done and that she can win and battle through adversity. So I think she beats Alexa Grasso, and I think she beats a deteriorating Valentina Shevchenko, who's on the way out, in my opinion. So I think we're going to soon see the champion, that championship belt, around Erin Blanchfield's waist, and I think she could definitely reign at flyweight for a long time to come. And the last topic I've got here is just I wanted to talk about the promising future of the bantamweight division, because um, this is slowly becoming one of the most exciting and promising weight classes in the sport, and especially with the names coming up, even outside the rankings. Like, with a new champion, it always just resets the excitement. Like, with Volkanovski, he's beat so many guys. I'm still hyped to see him fight every time because I just want to see what kind of domination he's going to put on people. Or like with Adesanya when before he lost to Pereira, or with Leon Edwards overcoming Kamaru Usman. Like, when Usman was champ, you're like, it's going to be a status quo domination from Usman, and then bam, the head kick. And then there's excitement in the weight class. There's new matchups. There's new guys like Shavkat, Bilal, Colby for a new challenge. Like, when you see guys that just haven't fought any one of the contenders, it's just so much excitement. So with Sean O'Malley knocking out Aljamain Sterling, who had wins over Peter Yan, Pedro Munoz, Henry Cejudo, TJ Dillashaw, like Corey Sandhagen, he'd beat pretty much the top of the rankings, apart from Cheeto Vera and Sean O'Malley, and then obviously Marab. Um, he'd beat everyone at the top of bantamweight. So that new champion really helps us out here. And O'Malley's got tons of fresh matchups: Cheeto, Corey, Marab, Aljo in a rematch maybe, Cejudo, Sanhagen, Song Yadong, like Peter Yan in a rematch maybe, Cheeto Vera if I didn't say that already. There's a lot of new kind of opponents for Sean O'Malley, and also um, so that brings a lot of excitement. There's guys like Umar climbing up the rankings too. Song Yadong's looking really good, and he's only 5 or 26 years of age. Um, and as well, even with a young champion, Sean O'Malley, I don't even believe he's in his 30s yet. So that is really exciting for bantamweight. And then I want to look at some of these names that I've got coming up. Whether all of these guys make the rankings or the top 10, whatever. But these are some guys that are looking really exciting and really good. Like Marcus McGee, Daniel Santos, Cameron Simon, Damon Blackshear, Rinya Nakamura is a guy who I expect to be a top 5 fighter. Mario Batista, Javid Basharat, Song Yadong, and then Umar in the rankings, those two. Like, the future bantamweight, I believe I just named like 10-ish fighters. Like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 fighters just there. I could name more. Like, Adrian Yanez, I think, is going to bounce back. Um, so many guys. So, like Kyler Phillips. I believe that there's going to be a ton of excitement in the bantamweight division, and I think in 5 years' time, and still like guys like Sandhagen, O'Malley, um, they're still going to be there. Jan, maybe Marab, potentially. Like, there's still a bunch of those top guys. Like we're probably going to see Munoz fade out. We're probably going to see Aljo fade out. We're probably going to see Dominic Cruz fade out. Like some of them are going to go, but there's going to be an influx of new, exciting guys into the top of that division, and just a bunch of new, exciting contenders. Um, and I'm hyped for it. Like Daniel Santos versus Daniel Marcos is a really exciting fight. I think the winner of that. I forgot to mention Daniel Marcos too. I'm not like saying he's going to be a top 15 fighter, but these are still exciting young fighters that have the potential to become ranked in the future. So I'm hyped for the future of bantamweight. It's one of the weight classes which I'm keeping my eye on for the next few years, and I think all of you guys should. Because otherwise, and keep an eye whenever you see these names fight. Whenever you see, I'm super hyped for Randy Nakamura's next fight. Like these guys, I want to see them on Black Shoe back in there. Like even though he just lost against Mario Batista, like I want to see these guys back in there and keep going and push their way up the rankings, and then take out some of the veterans, and then you go, hang on, these guys are top 10 caliber. So I'm hyped, and I think you guys should keep an eye on all of those names at bantamweight when they fight next. But let's go to the questions. First one is how far do you think O'Malley would go as champion? I did cover this briefly at the start of the podcast. I do believe he will get potentially two title defenses, depending on how the UFC sort of treats it. And I do believe he would beat Achito Vera, and I think they would, if they were smart, they would try and find him a more doable matchup. Because I believe he loses to Sandhagen, and I believe he loses to Marab. So, but even then, could catch Marab. So I think they're going to find a way to kind of navigate his title reign to keep him around as champion for a bit. So I expect one or two title defenses out of O'Malley before he inevitably fights someone who is just too good in the grappling and takes him down. The next question. What do you think are the best weight classes for a potential ever first three-division champion to compete in? Look, it's going to be tough to do, but you pretty much have to have uh, light heavy. It's got to be kind of middleweight, light heavyweight, heavyweight. Or maybe, or yeah, or middleweight. Yeah, middleweight, light heavyweight, heavyweight. It's got to kind of be. It's got to be an Alex Pereira. Like if Pereira had won the belt at middleweight, he can't do it now, but that's the kind of guy, and it has to be super stylistic. I think a women's fighter could do it. I think a women's 125er could probably, because women don't cut that much weight in the sport. So I think like an Erin Blanchfeild could potentially, or like even a Zhang Weili at strawweight could potentially cut that or just gain that weight. Like, and I think she's good enough because I think women's bantamweight is terrible. So I think she beats people there. And then I think she could potentially beat Erin Blanchfield or something like that. But in the lighter weight classes, it's tough. Like maybe a bantamweight, but I think there's just two. But like if Volk doesn't exist, maybe a bantamweight could do it. But it's super stylistic, and because you're gonna just run into so many problems with different champions, it's gonna be tough. But I think an Alex Pereira, like say you have like I don't know, who's an example for someone as champion? Maybe like I don't know, Cyril Gane or something like that. Like he's a real technical striker, big guy. But maybe Alex Pereira could beat him. I don't know. I'm not saying he would, but maybe he could. And so let's say if he'd beaten Adesanya back in April, and then goes up to light heavyweight, wins there. Like that's the kind of thing, and they need to be all the same style as them, but better. But like the champ has to be better. That's moving up. Next question. How do you think a fight between Max Holloway and Sean O'Malley would play out in a three-round fight? I do believe that Sean O'Malley in a three-rounder would get it done over Holloway. I think he catches him. I think he would really catch Max Holloway, who's been relying on his chin a lot. Holloway was getting cracked by Volk. And I believe even though Volk is phenomenal, I think O'Malley is a more clean, quick striker that'll catch you on the chin better than he did. Um, but yeah, good question. What do you think is Ilya's path to victory against Volk and vice versa? And if Volk beats Ilya, is he solidified as the featherweight GOAT since he will have beaten since he would have beaten fighters from the previous generation, his generation, and the next generation? Look, okay, I do believe Volkanovski is going to beat Ilya Topouria and make it look oddly easy. I think Ilya Topouria is like a guy, he's got good boxing and he's got good wrestling, but I don't think he's better than Volk in either of those areas. So he's got to somehow find a way to mix shit up better than Volk, who's like the best at mixing shit up, and then just somehow catch him with a shot. maybe that's his way to win. He's got to look for the shot. He's got to kind of try and bait Volk into a brawl. I think that's the one spot where he might be better than him. But apart from that, I do believe Volkanovski's game plan will just be to stick and move, use the leg kicks more, outpoint Topouria, mix in some of his grappling, I think, which he would have success with. And if he wins, I believe he's the featherweight goat. I think there's already solid argument, but that would definitely solidify it in my opinion. Um, Next question. What do you think a fight with O'Malley and Umar would look like? Right now, I would take O'Malley because I need to see Umar fight a good opponent because really he's fought no one. Like his best opponent is Raoni Barcelos, but he was booked to fight Corey Sandhagen and we were going to see a lot from that and we were going to find out a lot of shit. But he got injured and he pulled out. So I'm not going to talk about Umar as a top contender until he beats a top 10 guy. And right now, I do believe O'Malley would catch him with a big shot and put him away. Next question. Do you think Weili can beat Grasso and how? I do believe she can beat Grasso and I think she would wrestle. And I do believe she's better than Shevchenko on the feet, so she wouldn't be losing those boxing exchanges as easily as Shevchenko was. So I would actually favour Weili to beat Grasso because Grasso's not like a super big physical presence. And I don't know, what's she going to do? Like, outbox Weili? Weili just shoots. I don't think she stuffs those takedowns. And even if she outboxes Weili, I don't know. I just don't see her just dominating that fight anyway. Next one. Fantasy matchups. I'll go through them. Yoel Romero versus Khamzat Chimaev. I want to see Khamzat at middleweight. If he runs through Costa, then my answer is Khamzat. Right now, tough. I'll lean Romero on the feet, because I think it would take place there. Because I don't think Hamzat's taking Romero down. That being said, Whitaker did take him down, so maybe. Prime Tony versus Oliveira. I think Oliveira would win. I think he's just a more evolved version of Tony and a more clean version of him as well. The only advantage Tony really has is the chin, and maybe the chin and the cardio. In a 3-rounder, I would definitely take Oliveira. In a 5-rounder, I still think Oliveira would just get it done and finish him. We saw it in the 3-rounder, but that wasn't prime Tony, but he dominated him on the grappling. I think his grappling game is just more well-rounded, and I think his striking is just more dangerous and powerful. Next one, Volk versus Poirier. That's a really good fight. I think Volkanovski would win just by being better everywhere. Like, I think Volkanovski is arguably a better boxer, you know? Like, he was having trouble with Yair, but that's the flashy kicks and stuff. I think Poirier, I think, is coming towards the end of his career. I'm not saying he looks terrible, but like I think he's just kind of slowing down. He's losing that kind of hunger. And I believe Volkanovski would be very competitive on the feet with him, but then mix in the grappling, mix in the clinch, just do more there as well. Izzy versus Pereira, light heavyweight. Look, I want to see Pereira against Yair, and I want to see Izzy in his next fight against Strickland, obviously, which I do think he will win. But I want to see him get a finish in that fight for me. If he can't finish Strickland, then I don't have confidence that he would beat Pereira up a light heavyweight. I think Alex's chin is going to be majorly refreshed. We saw that in the Blachowicz fight. And I think he's becoming a more stronger presence, and I think he would actually have more success with the grappling now. So I'll take Pereira. Umar versus Marab. I'm going to take Marab as of right now solely because we haven't seen enough of Umar yet. And I think that it's more about the stand up. Because in the grappling, I have no doubt it's not like I need to see it. Like we know he's got great grappling, and I do believe he's got good stand up. But I just want to see because if he can fend off the takedowns and beat him on the feet, then obviously he wins that fight. But I just haven't seen him outclass and outstrike a top 5 or top 10 or even top 15 bantamweight. So I'll take Marab right now, just using the cardio and pressure. And then O'Malley versus Sandhagen. I believe Sandhagen wins a decision probably, in my opinion. I think he would mix in the grappling really well. I think he wouldn't be afraid, like Sterling, to make the crowd do a little bit. And I believe he has the capability to win on the feet. He's durable as well, tough to put away. So I think he wins that fight. Sergey Pavlovich versus Cyril Gane, who wins is the next question. I believe Sergey Pavlovich wins. I think he would cut him off. I think he would use his reach and his power. And I don't think he would be stunned by the shots of Cyril Gane. Yeah, I just think, I think he's just so much more powerful. He's better in a brawl. Gane got dropped by Tuivasa, so I do believe that Pavlovich would be able to kind of corner him off and land a big shot. So I think Pavlovich wins by KO. Next one. What do you think should be the criteria for a champion to deserve a rematch in the case where he loses against a contender? He says, I think it's ridiculous that Aljo won't get an immediate rematch when Garbrandt was given one with 0 defenses under the belt. I know. I know it's a popularity contest, but I hate that, and was wondering if you had a solution that would be fair to all the fighters. Okay. Yeah, it's look like money talks. It's gonna be about what sells a lot of pay-per-views, what is really big, and especially because look, I didn't watch the UFC back when Garbrandt rematched Dillashaw, but I think maybe it's the fact that he beat Cruz so like kind of cool, and it looked really good, and he had some hype around him, and that was a big rivalry. So they're always going to do a rivalry. Like O'Malley Sterling isn't like a rivalry. They don't like each other, but it's not like a there's no backstory there. They didn't train together or something like. Dillashaw and Garbrandt trained together. They had beef. After all that shit happened with Rand Ludwig and that. So I think in that case, they just had a storyline there and they wanted to capitalize on it. Um, and right now, I think with Aljo, the situation there is he's not a massive draw. He's not a super exciting guy. He's not a major personality. Um, and there's other guys to fight. Look, I believe Aljo deserves a rematch over Chito Vera, but just the fact that the UFC clearly has multiple guys that they could go to for a big fight, I don't think they immediately go back to Aljo. But I see your point. Next one. With a lot of new prospects and contenders rising, how would you rank the divisions in the UFC? From least exciting to most exciting? And also, with a win over Lemos, do you think Zhang Weili should become the number one female pound for pound fighter? Well, she is right now. She's tied with Grasso. She's equal number one. But on your other question, which is more interesting, best to worst division, I'll say best bantamweight or lightweight? Fuck, that's tough. Look, I'll go with lightweight right now just because it's just so, I don't know. It's like the marquee division. Lightweight and bantamweight basically equal first. I think welterweight's next. I think featherweight, no. I think heavyweight's after that. Then middleweight, then featherweight, then light heavyweight, then flyweight. Or maybe vice versa there. But there's just not that many guys at the top of flyweight that are looking to get a title shot. Like basically, Pantoja is champ. Assuming Figgy's gone up, it's basically just Royval, Moreno, and Elbazi are the only guys there that are really looking at a shot right now. So that's why I can't give flyweight that much props. But I do love Pantoja. Um, but heavyweight is like it's good. It's not bad. Like Pereira there has really livened it up. Pereira, Hill when he comes back, Yair, Uncle Live, Johnny Walker. Like there's some good guys there, but they just aren't making a lot of the fights. Middleweight is exciting with Drickus. Um, and then there's a few guys coming up. Like middleweight is actually one of the better divisions in terms of the unranked guys that are coming up. Like you got Joe Pyfer, Bo Nickel, Khamzats going to come in. That'll make it exciting. Like Kaya Baralio and the Sultan Ruzaboev, Roman Kopylov, Anthony Hernandez. Like there's a lot of guys coming up at middleweight, which I expect will be in the top 10. But I think the best is lightweight pretty much equal with bantamweight, and I think the third best is welterweight. Featherweight is good in terms of the contender matchups, but there's not enough competitiveness with the champion and the contenders. Like I love you, Volk. Like fucking hell, make it a bit more competitive. Stop dominating these guys because it just makes it not intriguing whenever the next challenger comes along. I'm excited about heavyweight though. I like the way that the heavyweight division is looking right now. I'm excited to see Almeida, Pavlovich, and Aspinall kind of be that trio once Jones leaves, and Gane's going to be there too. Like I think heavyweight's actually going to become a good division again. At the top. But good question. Next one. Thoughts of the new gen of lightweight fighters, the people we thought would be contenders in brackets. We're losing to other fighters, Demir to Dawson, Gamrot to Dariush, Turner to Hooker, Guram to Brenner, etc. Yeah, I did talk about this in a podcast after UFC 290. That was the first podcast I did on the channel. Um, but yeah, look, it's kind of just the fact of how good lightweight is and how many. I talked about how many levels there are at lightweight. Like it's in 2 to 3 ranked blocks. Like I think Islam and Oliveira are the first level. I think Gaethje and Poirier are the second level. I think Dariush, Chandler, Fazeev, Armand are the third level. I think Gamrot, Dan Hooker, Jalen Turner, these kind of guys are the fourth level, and then the fifth level is those kind of 13 to unranked guys like Moicano, Frivola, Brenner, Guram, Demir, all those kind of guys. So it's just how competitive the division is and how much more you need to improve to go from number 12 to number 6. Like, that's a massive jump. Or even like number 12 to number 8. Like, that's a huge jump for lightweights. So, yeah, it's basically comes down to that. Next question. Arnold Allen versus Yair potential fight breakdown. That's a really good fight. I like that one. I want to go back and rewatch Arnold Allen versus Holloway because I haven't watched that back since I watched it live. Pretty much just because I didn't really watch any Max Holloway tape in the lead up to the zombie fight because I kind of knew that Holloway was just going to win. We all kind of did. And then Arnold Allen hasn't fought since, so I haven't had a chance to go back and rewatch that one. But just off recent memory, that'd be a really competitive fight. I would lean Yair just with the explosiveness and the kind of danger. But that's a really exciting one, and I think it goes 5. Um, and that's a really good fight night main event to do really anywhere. Mexico, London, fucking in America, whatever. Like, that's a sick fight. Next one. If he returns to the UFC, where do you think Mighty Mouse would stand in the rankings for flyweight and bantamweight since he's another fighter? Look, I'm not going to talk about bantamweight. I think he loses to pretty much all the top 10 there just because he's too small. But at flyweight, I think he'd still be up the top because he's just that good. And I don't think flyweight's a very deep division. Like, kind of falls off after the top 5 or 6. So I think he'd be a top 5 fighter. But just he has slowed down. He's not as good as he was. Look, Prime Mighty Mouse is the champion of flyweight still with like 20 defenses. But right now I think he loses to Pantoja. I think he loses to Moreno. I think he could beat Royval. Like, but it's just hard to tell because I don't think the quality of one championship fighters is nearly as good as the UFC. So it's not the most accurate representation. But yeah, I think it still have success. Next one. Do you think Khamzat has the potential to become as big or bigger than McGregor? He has the potential to be a very big star and like a 1 million pay-per-view kind of guy. Like a million box office draw is, I think, the limit of Hamza, but I don't think he can become as big as McGregor simply because the hype and has kind of it's come to a not a close, but it's the steam's kind of slowed down. Like, he had so much steam on him after the Li Jingliang fight and the Burns fight. I was like, oh, this is sick. He went through a war. Like, all the good fighters had that fight, like Adesanya against Gastelum, all these kind of guys. So like Jones even has tough fights. Like Volk had his tough fight against like Max in the second one. Um, so I think that was like not even a bad thing. I think people think that having a close fight with Burns stopped his hype. I think it was more like when he fought Holland, people didn't like him because of all the weight missing shit and how he treated that afterwards. But then he just took so much time off, and then we just weren't talking about him. Like, we're like, "Where's Hamza? Where's Hamza?" And eventually we're like, "Whatever, we'll know where Hamza is when we get an announcement." So I think that's kind of why it slowed down a little bit. But if he has a big dominant win over Costa in Abu Dhabi, has a good moment. On the mic, calls for title shot, fights Izzy, beats him. That's how he gets that hype back, and that's how he becomes a big kind of millions pay-per-view draw. Next one. What would happen if Pantoja moved up and challenged O'Malley for the bantamweight belt? Look, I love Pantoja. He's a great guy. He's a lovely little lad. Um, but he would lose to O'Malley. He's just too small. He's not dominant enough with the grappling. Like, he's just not enough of a physical presence. O'Malley was able to dance around and cut off and ignore Aljo's kind of angling and like Aljo's pressure. And Aljo's a much bigger, much more imposing grappler than Pantoja. Pantoja's a great fighter, and I think he can definitely string together a few fights, a few title defenses at bantamweight. Oh, sorry, at flyweight. But there's a big size gap in between flyweight and bantamweight. Like, there's a reason why guys cut to flyweight because you're too small. Like, that's why Cejudo is undersized at bantamweight, but he's just good because of that wrestling. And he's strong and he's stocky. But Pantoja, you can see a clear frame difference. Like, him and Cejudo are probably a pretty similar height. He might even be a bit taller, but he's just not as filled out. He's not as bulky or as strong. So I do believe that O'Malley would KO him. But I love Pantoja, man. Next one. If the UFC added a 165, 195, and maybe 215 or 225 division, who would be the potential champions? Are there any potential double champions? Okay, a 165-pound champ. I think you're looking at a Colby Covington or an Islam Makhachev. I think would be more willing to go up, give up a bit less size. I think Colby could definitely cut that extra 5 pounds. I think Burns could probably cut the extra five. Um, I think Oliveira could potentially be tempted to go up if Islam didn't. Like whichever one of them went up, the other one would just stay at lightweight. Like if Islam went up, Oliveira just wins the belt at lightweight. If Oliveira goes up, Islam just holds the belt. But yeah, I think champion it's between Islam and Colby in my opinion. Depending if those guys went there, I would lean Islam. A 195-pound. I think the champion, as much as I hate to say it, would probably be Adesanya. I think that extra 10 pounds, I think that's a good weight. Even though 185 is his perfect weight class, I don't think he would be giving up as much size. Like Pavlovich, I don't think cuts down that much. I think Yair might. I think like Krylov could. Paul Craig would definitely probably fight there. Like Drickus could maybe move up because he's a big guy. Like I think that Cannonier for sure. But I think Izzy beats all those guys. Pereira would be there for sure. That would be good for him. And then 215 or 225. I think Gelton Almeida would be the perfect 225-pound champion. Cut like 19, 18 pounds ish. He weighs in at like 235. He weighs in under 240 every time. So that guy 225-pound champ for sure. If it was 215, then you'd probably be looking at like maybe a Blachowicz or a kind of one of the bigger light, like an Ankalaev maybe, or like a really small heavyweight. I think Cyril Gane could potentially kind of cut to 225 maybe, but that would be pretty interesting. Double champions, no. Or yeah, Izzy could be a 185 and 195. Almeida could be a heavyweight and 225 champ. If he just wanted to kind of switch between like he has been doing. Islam could be 155, 165. So yeah, could be. Next one. As the sport advances, is it possible that we may see less and less dominant champions? Sterling and Usman were close to divisional GOAT status before being viciously KO'd. Yeah, look, it's Volk right now. Volk's holding on to the kind of mantle of being the last dominant champion because Izzy lost, Usman lost, Aljo lost, all these guys lost. Jones, I don't think, sticks around for long enough to be considered a dominant champion. Um, so yeah, I do believe it's Volk, and I think it's because there's new styles coming through. There's more skill in all the contenders. There's no like free contenders anymore. Like if you look back at some of the older champions' resumes and you see some contenders, like who the fuck is that guy? Like you just see some guys and you're like, this isn't a top guy. Like this guy wouldn't even be top 10 or top 15 in today's day and age. So they like back then there were some kind of free title defenses. Right now, none of that. Like you look at Volk's resume, nothing cheap on there. You look at like I don't know Jones's resume, nothing cheap. Izzy's resume, nothing cheap. Like Strickland coming up is probably going to be the like lowest level you could say, quote unquote, lowest level opponent. Um, that he's fought. But apart from that, yeah, I think it's just because everyone's just so good and everyone that fights for the belt deserves it, and they have game plans now, and it's just better. So yeah, I think after Volk falls, I think that's potentially the end of the dominant reign of champions. Next one, who is your favorite fighter in each division and why? This is a good one to end on. Last question. Flyweight. Okay, women's strawweight, Zhang Weili. Women's flyweight, Erin Blanchfeild. Women's bantamweight, fucking none of them. Flyweight, Pantoja. Bantamweight, Song Yadong. Featherweight, Volkanovski. Lightweight, Oliveira. Welterweight, um, welterweight's tough. I'm not actually like that invested in any welterweight fighters. Maybe Della. Maybe who do I love at welterweight? Like who? I'm trying to think. If I could just make the champion who I wanted it to be, maybe Shavkat, maybe Ian Garry, because I think it'd be just entertaining. I don't know. Welterweight, I don't really care to be honest. All the other divisions, I have a guy that I want as champ. Um, but welterweight, I don't really care. Middleweight, look, for what middleweight? Probably Strickland, Drickus, Khamzats, maybe. Like those are the kind of guys I would want to be champ. Light heavyweight, Yuri Prohaska, and then heavyweight, Sergey Pavlovich, is my favorite fighter at heavyweight. Um, But that is the podcast, guys. First one in a while, first video in a while. Thanks for listening. Give the video a like, subscribe to the channel. Go follow my Instagram over at Leftlane MMA. I've been doing some podcasts recently with MMA Anonymous, which has been really fun. So go check out his channel too, MMA Anonymous. I'll link it in the description. And other than that, thanks for watching. Leave a comment on what you reckon about all the questions, all that. Leave some more for the next one, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.